It's the Sod Pod, brought to you by Grassland Agro. The Sod Pod. Hello, and welcome to episode 8 of the Sod Pod. In the last episode, we had a fantastic conversation with our consultant vet, Bernard Furlong from County Wexford. I've good news for you. He's back again. Welcome, Bernard.
Hello, how are you doing?
Right, good. And there's better news as well. Davy is back on the panel. David, you missed the last episode in episode 7. You didn't show up to a few of the training sessions. We had to drop you. You're back. You're looking fit.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I'm back again now, thank God. Put in a bit of training now, so we'll see how today goes. Hopefully I last the match.
We'll give you a half anyway. So look, lads, what we're going to crack on about today, Pica. Shawnee, let's talk Pica.
Yeah, I suppose we're at the time of year whenever animals are showing signs of Pica, James, basically a deficiency. What are we looking out for? We're looking at the animals and a change in behaviour. So they're chewing at stones, licking at clay, chewing at rubber, licking urine. We'll get into it in a bit more detail, but basically 3 of the factors that is affecting the animals is a lack of sodium, a lack of fibre, and importantly a lack of phosphorus. So they're sort of the 3 pillars that are affecting the animal. And I suppose, Bernard, maybe you want to start off and give us a bit more of an in-depth summary of what the animal is experiencing whenever they're showing symptoms of Pica.
Yeah, so I suppose, you're bang on the money there. You'll see the cows as they're going in and out of the milking parlour. They'll be picking on the stones, licking at the stones in the soil, on the banks, on the roadways, in and out of the parlour. Oftentimes, I think, John, you showed me a picture one day on a post-mortem of a cow, and her whole stomach was just full of stones, pretty much like gravel everywhere,
Yeah, it was a real extreme example, I'd say, Bernard. And even you were shocked, which is hard to shock a vet, and especially a man from Wexford. You weren't even shocked after you got bet by Dublin. So
no, John, I know you're on the up at the moment there after one win in 10 years with Clare, but you'll get some fright in the coming weeks, But I suppose, look, these are just the signs that we see visually. There is other major signs that are probably a bit more hidden, or that the farmer and the vet may not necessarily know, and they would include potentially a reduced appetite, reduced feed intake, the bone mineralization within the cow and the calves would be reduced. There's a reduced weight gain in all animals. That has been shown, and most importantly, I suppose, on a financial side of it, you'll have a reduced yields, milk yields, and the reproductive cycle can be inhibited as well, I suppose,
This time of year, animals some farmers have started breeding phosphorus, especially if the animal isn't performing at a top level, or if there's any sort of stress on the animal, it's going to affect the reproductive performance of the animals.
Of course, yeah. When we talk stress, I suppose we're at the time of the year now. We're well into the breeding season, and cows are they're hitting their peak milk yield, and we're also trying to ask them to go back and calf as soon as possible, to keep the whole cycle moving along. And I suppose if there's any change, if there's any drop in the mineral status, in the nutrient status of the animal, or any other stress, whether it be lameness, body condition, whatever, it's going to have an impact on the animal. So these cows that we have in Ireland at the moment, they're finely tuned, and if we knock them off kilter just that little bit at all, that can set them back in various different ways, And
a lot of cows, Bernard, probably, or a lot of farms do experience it, and farmers don't actually think they have it. And if you ask them, do they see Pica, and we see it ourselves going around the farms, farmers say, oh no, I don't have it, I've never seen it, but yet there is. And I know we were out one day on a farmer said he had no Pica, I suppose, when we were on a roadshow, and the cow inside in the ditch there chewing away on the clay.
Yeah, he was a top class farmer as well, and he was very well in tune with his cows, but his back was turned, and there she was, and she was picking away at the clay, picking away at the soil, stones and whatnot, You
need a fresh eyes going in on farm, don't you?
Yeah, you probably do, if you're seeing it the whole time, it's nothing different to you, so a fresh pair of eyes, it is good, I probably didn't notice it as much myself down through the years until we kind of investigated a bit more there in recent months, there is probably more of it out there than we expect ourselves.
When farms are more highly stocked, and there's more requirement on cows and greater output, and cows now milking 6,000-7,000 litres, and stocked at maybe, even on a milk platform there mid-season could be 3 to 3.5 livestock units. There's a big demand on ground and a big demand out of cows too, so something has to give.
Yeah.
It's all about the diet basically, and the like I suppose the animal isn't getting enough, whether it's fibre, phosphorus or sodium. And like we done a video pee uptake on a well aerated or good structured soils, David, and then versus a compact soil. Both soils was at index 3, but the pee concentration in the plant differed on them two soils.
Yeah, so both different, Sean, and it's just down to the structure of that soil. Both index 3, as you said, but just not being able to access that P fertility or that index 3 phosphorus in the soil, just because the roots were not there to take it up. The phosphorus was in the ground, but the roots are not there because they just can't access it. So it is a big problem, and we've seen on the soil sustainability program compaction across the country.
Yeah. But I think there's a very good point you made, Bernard, there about, that we can actually have Pica in younger or growing stock as well. Like, we only really associate it with milking cows. And we probably can pick up on it quicker in milking cows because we're more hands-on and we see them in and out of the parlour twice a day. Like, but in younger stock, it could be a hidden deficiency there as well that could be worth.
Yeah, it could just be something simple as they're not reaching their growth targets like you'd like them to, and it could be just that those calves, the farmer might just say to you, they're just not doing as well as previous years,
Bernard, I suppose, even anecdotally you'd hear AI men taking stones out of cows and something.
Yeah, when you've been examining a few cows yourself as well, like over the course of the year, you'd put your hand in, you might be examining her just to see if she's in calf or not, and you could put out a bit of gravel, a few stones, things like that, and I'd say, I suppose when I first started as a vet, I would have done it and I probably would have mentioned it to the farmer. We both might have just shrugged our shoulders and moved on, whereas I suppose I'd have a better awareness of it there now, and I might take it into consideration the next time if I do see it. There probably isn't a massive amount of research in Pica, and as a veterinary point of view at the moment, looking down, trying to find papers on it.
But just even just talking about Pica there again, and we talk about, Sean, you talked about sodium and phosphorus and fibre, and there are maybe 3 big issues, but even for all of them, for all of you there, what is the, I suppose, most ideal type of grass that throughout the grazing season? Is it like late summer when growth rates are declining and there's a bit more fibre in the grass? That's probably the most ideal type of herbage that a cow would be consuming. And obviously you can't do anything about that because of the physiology of the plant, but that's probably the most ideal.
Cows can get very loose though, into the later part of the year though as well, Dave. So there's generally sometimes, when you have after grass coming in after a second cut and stuff like that.
We don't really have that much control over it though, because the dry matter of grass is dictated by weather. Whether it's too hot during a drought situation, you're going to dry matters of 23-24%, and then if there's a spell of...
that's dry matter, but you've huge control over the quality of the grass in relation to grassland management and measuring, Sean. That's going to have a bigger... Obviously the dry matter, there's nothing really we can do, but around the balance between protein, fibre and energy, that's going to be determined by your pre-grazing yield as well. But would you agree, Sean?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, well, obviously, your grassland management, you need to be grazing the right coverage, but there can be fluctuations in grass. We're in second rotation grass now. Some farmers might be close to the third, yeah. So it's always that lower. That first rotation grass is around 18, 19, 20% dry matter. You could be down as low as 13, 14, 50% now. And I suppose potentially, and you might comment on this, Bernard, a lot of herds might be experiencing a bit of subclinical acidosis because of that lusher grass, and maybe the absorption of nutrients from the rumen is limited a small bit because of that drop in rumen pH.
Yeah, so I suppose on a roadshow we're discussing a good bit there about SARA, and what does SARA stand for? It's that subacute ruminal acidosis. It's when the pH of the rumen is lower than you'd like it to be. That big fermentation vat, that big stomach that cow has, the pH is lower than you'd like it to be. It's lower than 5.5, and that will affect the absorption and the uptake of nutrients within the gastrointestinal tract of that cow.
Back to Pica again, the phosphorus is affected. Joe, you talk about SARA. If the rumen is not functioning right, and you talk about absorption, the phosphorus is
of course absorbed. It is, yeah. And I suppose another thing that can affect phosphorus as well, I remember reading a paper as well, if you have a high worm burden, you can have a reduced uptake of phosphorus up to I think off the top of my head 40%. If you have 100% phosphorus going in, there might be only 60% being absorbed into the system, like, you know. So that's the high worm burden as well. Look, that's another day's work, maybe discussing, talking about worms, like, but it's just another side note. It's something interesting. So you probably have SARA, it's playing a role. There's a high level of that on dairy farms in Ireland, and worms as well potentially playing a big role as well.
Bernard, from our point of view, and as something like, obviously we have our animal nutrition range, but we spend a lot of time on the site sustainability program trying to improve soil fertility and forage quality. But probably this year, lads, I think it's fair to say with the price of fertiliser, there's probably not, and availability, there's probably not as much phosphorus coming in the farm gate, and that's going to have an impact. Would you agree, Sean? Or
yeah, so John, I suppose what you're saying there is that I suppose some farmers have gone away from maybe spreading P and they just went with straight or nitrogen products, and like by doing that, there's less of a P concentration in the grass plant because we're relying more so from the soil. And then what we've seen on our sustainability program, as you said, compacted soils, poor root structure. If we have limited roots, we have limited uptake. So if we're relying on the soil and the roots or the structure's poor, we're just not the concentration. Like at best, at really good soil structure, index 3 and 4 for P and K, you still might only have 75% of the requirement. So there is always going to be a requirement for supplementation.
yeah, it's one we have to be very conscious of. And I suppose, Bernard, like, even when we were going around, and Pica was obviously something that we were focusing on as part of a roadshow that we did with our teams, but like, you actually got a text in out of the blue from the...
Yeah, so look, I'm just in a WhatsApp group there with the regional vet lab in Kilkenny. There's have all the, I suppose, the predominantly large animal vets or mixed practice vets that would service the regional vet lab, and they just issued like a kind of a little bit of an alert saying that keep an eye out for phosphorus deficiency. Make sure it's one of your differential diagnoses when you're treating cows at the moment, because given, I suppose, their temperatures at the time of that text, I suppose the temperatures were a bit cold. There was a slight, maybe I won't call it drought-like conditions, but drier ground, and that
drought,
yeah. So that could drive a little bit of phosphorus deficiency as well, like, you know.
And around the time we're in here now, Bernard, like just even around embryo loss and that, we're probably well into breeding now at this stage, and I suppose there's potential there that cows could lose.
Yeah, so look, I suppose we probably didn't mention at the very start, like, phosphorus, it's one of those major minerals, you know. It's probably one of 6 major minerals that we're dealing with for cows. And phosphorus, the main objective, or the main reason we're talking about phosphorus, is we need it for that microbial protein synthesis. So whenever the microbes within our guts are breaking down the cow's forage and nuts and whatnot, they need the phosphorus for that. They need it to utilise their energy and for their own metabolism, for their own cell membranes within their body, for their DNA as well, like, you know. So look, it's no difference for the cow than it is for the embryo. You need those embryos and those fetuses need that same level of phosphorus as well, like, you know.
What I think is a bit mad is that we're talking about this nearly every year about Pica, right? And if we don't do anything about it, and then suddenly we see animals licking stones and that, like, if they were licking stones last year, chewing at wire last year, chewing at rubber last year, that's still in the gut. That hasn't been got rid of. Then we're adding to it this year, and then if cows are going calving, like, we could puncture the rumen, or we could, like, there could be, if there's a build up of say wire or stones or that, it can cause serious damage to the animal maybe in 6 or 12 months time, whenever.
Of course, yeah. Like, look, just because the cow eats stones, we'll say today, that's not to say in 6 months time that stone or that other foreign material that's within that body is not going to wreak havoc, like, you know. Obviously, the worst comes to worst, the cow dies, like, you know, and you don't want to lose any cow either, like, you know. But there's other impacts it can have as well. I suppose there could be a level of constipation. If the rumen is going to be full of stones, they're inanimate objects, they're of no benefit in the rumen, they're going to have some level of impact there as well, like, you know.
And then whenever animals are in calve, say 7, 8, 9 months in calve and getting ready to, or say whenever during calving, there's an awful lot of pressure on the rumen, and, you know, you could have pressure on the heart. Or
look, when they're eating their stones or whatever else, that if they did ingest a bit of wire, and the wire, which is I find quite common. Look, I'm working in the southeast region of the country, and I think it's a big issue anyway. A lot of my farmers would agree as well. There's some farmers out there, they love when I give a magnet to a cow, because there is an issue out there when cows ingest a little bit of wire, and that's all it has to be, a little bit of wire. And if she's forcing or contracting, or if there's great pressure within the rumen and the wire is stuck in the rumen there somewhere, and it potentially can push from the rumen through the wall of the rumen, past the diaphragm, and in towards the wall of the heart, like, you know, the pericardium. And obviously it can cause heart issues then, and we do see it quite commonly, you know. And with that then we tend to give a magnet. And what the magnet is, it's a bolus, I suppose, quite similar to any type of a bolus, and it's enclosed with a plastic kind of a covering, so that if the magnet, if there is other wires or other bits of nails and things like that, staples out of fencing, if they are present within the rumen, they'll be attracted to this magnet, and they'll be enclosed and kept in a safe place until the time that the animal goes to slaughter or passes away, like, you know.
Is it common, or like it's something that
common? Like, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but like, I suppose, like, yeah, I think heart problems are common. I couldn't give you a figure, like, but anecdotally.
And is it just a preventative? Like,
so it's just preventative. Like, so you could call out to a farmer and you could see. Now, look, I'm not just saying this is completely down to phosphorus deficiency, but it potentially can be, like, you know. But you go out to a cow, she could be a few weeks calved, or maybe only less than a week calved. She'd have a very high heart rate. You might hear the murmur in the heart. You might not hear the heart great at all, because there could be fluid or pus around the heart, so it's quite hard to listen to the heart with the stethoscope. She might not like when you put pressure on the heart, when you pinch on the withers, or if you're putting your hand up per rectum, you know, there's a level of pressure within the abdomen. She might hunch her back up, and she might not appreciate it. And the other thing which farmers tend to spot, particularly the farmers that have issues with heart problems, they'll see that jugular pulse, you know, that jugular pulse on the left hand side of the neck. Like, you'll see it just pulsing up, and that means there's a backflow of blood that should be going down towards the heart, but instead there's a certain level of blood going back up towards the head, like, you know.
Like, I was a bit surprised by, you know, that it was such an issue, to be honest, Bernard. But I was chatting to one of our lads, John Corbett, and they sell machinery, and he was they've really good machinery, but he was talking about on the diet feeders now, they have magnets, and the amount of foreign objects that you pick up, like, per mix is absolutely huge, like, do you know?
Yeah. Now look, I know nothing about machinery. I never claimed to, never will. A lot of this stuff, when you're talking,
you wouldn't stand back for much now, Bernard.
Wouldn't go near that machinery, Craig.
There was no question you couldn't answer except the one where we asked you why Wexford lost at home to Dublin, but
sure, like, Dublin are a good team, John.
There it is again.
To be fair.
But come here, Bernard, one thing that I thought was, and it kind of ties into the Pica, is that you were talking about in the condition score and your approach to veterinary and animal health plans, is that you're looking for trends, whether it's the locomotion score, and probably the phosphorus could be linking on into maybe, you know, milk fever and stuff like that.
There is a certain cohort of cows that are hypocalcemic, that have milk fever, whether it be subclinical or not. They would have a level of phosphorus deficiency. And look, whenever I go out and treat a cow with milk fever, I just treat the cow with milk fever. I don't go off and I don't do blood tests, you know. That's not routinely done in this country, like, you know. I don't know, maybe it's done in other countries, but it's just not routinely done in our country. So I can never know by looking at a cow when she's down whether it's just a straightforward milk fever or there is a lack of phosphorus. However, I will say, if a cow is down and I treat her with intravenous calcium and she's still down within the next 12 hours, the farmer will ring and say, look, she's still down, call back out. And subconsciously, I'll always tend to give an injectable phosphorus IV along with the calcium again. There is an element there along with milk fever, you know.
So if we're picking up like Pica, like that could have a subsequent impact, whether it's ingesting foreign objects because they have their heads buried in the ditch, and, you know, hedge cutters are going to pick up bits of wire and stuff like that, or else it could have an impact on later lactation as well, or the embryo loss. Like, should we be? And I suppose the point I'm trying to, or the question I'm trying to ask, this is like sometimes we got a few statements rather than questions on the roadshow. But
yeah, come out with a question, will you?
Should we be looking at these things as a trend, or should?
Yeah. Look, herd health approach on farms is going to have to grow in the coming years. There's a big push on it within, you know, when I went to college in UCD, done the dairy health cert as well, we're always trying to get more of a herd health approach. And I suppose body condition scoring we talked a good bit about that on the road show as well. I think a lot of guys got into it as well, like, but it's no use just doing, say, a body condition score just at breeding and forgetting about it for the rest of the year. Like, you know, you want to get a trend over time, so you want to do your body condition scoring at calving, at breeding, at 100 days of milk, 200 days of milk, at calving. The more the better, like, you know. And it's the same with your locomotion scoring, particularly if you have a big issue of lameness on your farm. You want to do that at certain key intervals, you know, so maybe before the cows go into housing, after they're dried off, maybe pre-calving, at breeding again, throughout the course of the lactation, when they're out on grass the whole time and they're walking that bit more the whole time, like, you know. Metry checking is another thing as well, and I suppose it's easy for me to say to go ahead and do it, because a lot of those jobs have to be done at very busy times of the year during spring, like, you know, in the first 6 months of the year. But unfortunately, like, if you want to progress and get your dairy herd working to the best of its ability, that's where you are at the moment, like, you know. And metry checking is another thing we can do as well. All those kind of jobs, they're new jobs, but a lot of farmers are doing them at the moment. There's a lot of progressive farmers doing them at the moment. So
yeah, because even the magnets you were saying over in New Zealand is very common.
Yeah, I have friends that are over in New Zealand, and they tell me that routinely a lot of maiden heifers would just get a magnet, no different than if they were getting a worm dose, you know. Just it's a routine job that the New Zealand farmers do, and there is a certain amount of our clients as well. The yearling heifers are they're a bit stronger than that, like, yeah, they would, yeah.
We didn't really touch on sodium as well. Like, I suppose temperatures is picking up. Animals is out day and night now in majority of the country. There's a lot of walking being done. Animals are sweating, they're producing, so they're getting rid of sodium, but through the sweat, through the milk, through the urine. Like, how important is sodium? It obviously creates sodium bicarbonate, saliva. It's a really good natural rumen buffer. Like, how important is it in the animal? Like,
yeah, sure. Look, it's one of those major minerals that we're always discussing about. Sure. Look, if you're lacking sodium, you're going to have a low growth rate. You're going to have a reduced milk yield, and you're going to have pica as well. Typically, when you see a reduction in sodium on a farm, you'll see this real bizarre behaviour where cows are really licking the urine off of another cow. So when one cow is urinating, she's really kind of drinking that urine out of her.
So the sodium is more the urine than phosphorus.
Yeah, that's what I was always that's my take on it anyway. You'd see cows and they'd be just licking the urine off of another cow when she's urinating, like, you know, probably more so than with phosphorus, like, you know.
Well, it's just there, like, that's all great, like, you know, it's all great talk.
That's all great.
It's all big talk and Bernard. It's very interesting, like, you know, great points, like, and that. But like, what are we, like, what can we do on farm to overcome all these problems, like these pica problems? So we talked about all the processes and that, like, you know, but even going from starting at the plant and then go to the animal, and they should all be more so linked, I think, going forward, and going to be very hard to do, but we should be doing it. Like, obviously doing sign analysis. Maybe we should be doing more herbage analysis to see what's in herbage, and then maybe analysing cows with maybe blooding cows and see what the concentration is in cows. But like, even from a plant side of things, like, take a soil sample. If you're sampling once every 3 years, like, that's 1 point in time every 1,000 days, like, you know. Yeah. So it's grand, it's an indicator. I know from some of my own work I done, like, and I'm going to get a few eye rolls here now.
Here we go again.
Here we go. But how detail coming here now, Jans, but like, just pH, like, we talk about pH in the soil and we talk about pH in the rumen. They're both the same thing, like, you know. We're getting the pH right in the soil to get the microbes working, and we can actually increase phosphorus concentration in the soil just by fixing pH, and everything else it'll overcome. Sean, you were ranting on about compaction there, and
ranting. Cheers, fair play, Davy.
But you know, it's overcoming all these problems, and it's simple. And sure, Bernard, pH in the rumen is just paramount. Like, you know, it's
of course
it's the core of the animal.
Yeah.
So and we just talked about sodium there, like, so implementing sodium could potentially produce biocarbonate, which is rumen buffer, and that's keeping the pH up.
Yeah, and reducing the level of SARA then within the herd.
And increasing phosphorus absorption then as well, because there could be potentially enough phosphorus going into the animal but not absorbed because pH is off.
But you could be putting out your compounds and putting out your P. Well, but if it's not a protected form of P or that, your pH could be getting locked up. So you think you're doing the right job by putting out your 18,612, but if your pH isn't right, it's not being made plant available.
That's Johnny. But the other one is just putting it out at the right time of year as well. That's grand to say that we're putting out our 14 kilos of maintenance phosphorus, and said in index 2 we're putting out 10 kilos of build up, like. But if you're putting that out willy-nilly there whenever you want, like it's not going to do the work. Like, you need to put it in when you need it. That could overcome a lot of problems.
Calciphos has your sodium and your phosphorus, so that's if a couple of boxes hung up in the collecting yard or on the cow pass on the way out to field, the animals will self-regulate themselves of the sodium. They're getting the phosphorus intake as well. If they don't need it, at least the farmer can see that they're not licking. He's happy enough that they have the requirement. But if there is a period that a dry spell or the concentration concentration rumen has reduced for whatever reason, that they are getting supplemented for it. Obviously, the mineral supplementation in the meal can be increased, but there's practicalities around that as well. And then obviously a fibre source, then whether it's hay or straw or whatever. So there's a couple of key management practices, as he says, putting a plan in place, but prevention is always better than cure.
Absolutely savage, Sean, and thanks for that. As we're going to call it a day there, Pica, soil compaction, the peak concentration and good conversation on growth rates increasing as well. Some of the big signs there: chewing stones, licking clay, licking urine, and also reduced appetite could be another indicator there as well. Causes obviously that lack in sodium, P and fibre. Phosphorus deficiency is one of the key drivers of this, and that's what you're going to attempt to manage out. Mind yourself out there. Farm smart, farm safe. Hey, thanks for listening to the Sod Pod. We hope you enjoyed it. To find out more, head over to www.grasslandagro.ie or check out our social channels: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn and YouTube. That's all for this episode. See you next time.